welcome to Buffalo Good. You've landed on the show where we interview interesting people who live right here in the city of Buffalo. And my guest today, very happy to have her on, is Sue Chelowa.
Yes.
Now, Sue, correct me if I miss anything. You are a property owner in Buffalo.
Yes.
You are an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Yes. You are a French teacher at a local high school.
That's correct.
And you're pretty fabulous.
Oh, that's your opinion, but thank you.
You are. You're fabulous. Okay, so just let's start off. How does a French teacher get involved in reclaiming what is good about Buffalo?
I know. I don't even, I have to think about it. But I've always loved buildings, and I traveled a lot. I studied overseas, and I think, it came to a point where I couldn't spend every summer somewhere else, and I started looking around, and there were all these great buildings in Buffalo, and they were underused or abused, and the value was pretty inexpensive. So it was an idea that was sort of encouraged by some other people. Actually, a stranger that I met on a plane, a woman. I was taking students to France, and I was reading a Vogue magazine, and she kind of closed the magazine. She was sitting next to me, and she goes, "Oh, I see you're taking students overseas." I said, "Yes." She goes, "I used to be a teacher, English teacher, but I'm from California, and I've just been to your city. I do real estate." And she goes, "You have some of the best undervalued real estate in the country in your city, and no one gets it. And if you want to be able to afford the clothes in this magazine, start investing in your own city," which was weird. And I never saw her again. She gave me her business card. I tried to call her like several years later, and I couldn't get a hold of her. The numbers, didn't match, or whatever the case. So, but she got me thinking, and I came home from that trip and was really inspired. And then one thing led to another, and I bought the first building, which is now 464 Gallery, which is going to celebrate its 5th anniversary on Valentine's Day of this year.
No, you're talking about, real quick, you're talking about Gallery 464. That's on 464 Amherst Street. And
yes.
it's an art gallery?
Yes.
And what does it specialize in anything, or?
It specializes in up-and-coming artists. And basically we got our start because we were so close to Buff State. Actually, Marcus Wise, who runs the gallery, and we started getting students from Buff State coming to us because they need to do shows for their graduate, for their master's programs and things like that. And there wasn't enough space on campus, and there was limited space in the city of Buffalo. So we kind of fell into that, or, he did. We saw there was a need, and then it sort of grew from there, and it was really, he helps people do their first shows that have maybe, they've graduated, they've come to a point where they really want to exhibit. And so we're that sort of entry-level gallery. So it's been really inspiring because a lot of people have really grown over the 5 years that we've, had it. So that was, but that was buying a space that housed old appliances that was underused. It has a beautiful ceiling, tin ceiling and original fixtures, and it deserved to be something better. And so I was inspired with that, and then it kind of led to some other purchases on the street. And then a great community of people, and everybody wanting that kind of resurrect that part of the city, which is Black Rock.
Yeah, that's fascinating to me. If I understand you correctly, when you bought the building, you didn't buy it purposely to have an art gallery in there. You bought the building and then decided.
Yes, which was kind of scary.
That's a leap. That's a leap of faith.
Yes.
But I guess when you can do that if the prices are so low, first of all.
Yes.
And then second of all, you really believe in the community, and then there's this belief that there's goodness there, right?
Yeah.
Do you ever sit back and say, I'm helping rediscover, and I love the word discover because, it's like uncover. You're uncovering something that's already there, right? And what you're discovering is this goodness that's there. Do you ever sit back and almost pat yourself on the back and say, "Whoa, I can't believe I had a part in this"?
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of thing that it's the last 7 years, because I think it was 7 years ago. It's just been this, but it's happening all over the city of Buffalo. There's this sort of positive energy, and there's all these creative people, and we all sort of feed off each other. I mean, there's amazing people on Grant Street, and then there's people on that street that were there prior to me getting involved. And they encouraged me, and it's just kept going. And it's almost like, it's amazing because, I almost don't feel like I'm part of it. I'm watching it also. And I think also, which is great, is that a lot of Buffalonians are coming back. And I never left, but I went other places. And sometimes you need that perspective to come back and see that. I think there was a generation that was sort of discouraged because they saw the disinvestment in the city and a lot of population leave. And now sort of the opposite is happening, and people are investing again. And there's a positiveness about the city of Buffalo, which I think got lost somewhere along the line. It was this amazing city at the turn of the last century. And it's the people of Buffalo that are kind of bringing it back. So it's amazing, and it's so rewarding to be involved with sort of that wave. So I think it was at the beginning, a little bit of that wave. And then now it's really feels sort of, I mean, don't you feel it? I mean, in the arts and everything.
I feel it all the time. I would say I'm proud of telling people this. I lived in Georgia for almost 10 years after college. Loved it.
Yeah.
But the best thing I've ever done in my life is move back to Buffalo, New York.
Right.
I believe that in my heart. Now, there's a couple things that I want to just touch on with you, and I want to get your perspective on. I firmly believe art will save this city.
Yes.
And I had the opportunity to share that thought when a National Preservation Trust or historic trust came through, and they filmed in Buffalo, and they said, hey, what's good about Buffalo? And I really am proud of the fact that I shared that. Since then, that was a couple years ago, I've come to realize that there's another thing that I think will save Buffalo, and I think that is the influx of immigrant population. Do you see that immigrant population on a daily basis in the areas that you're helping to rediscover? And how do you think they can be best incorporated to rediscover this city? What do you think?
Well, there are something like 10,000, I believe, refugees, immigrants. A lot of them are refugees. So they're people that have come from circumstances that were dire. So Buffalo to them is like this amazing opportunity, which a lot of people, maybe some of us that have been here too long don't see it that way, but they do. They're populating the neighborhoods like in Black Rock. So there's this very family, there's children and there's families, and there's a very cohesiveness that probably existed maybe, for example, on the West Side 100 years ago with the Italian immigrants. So I think the immigrants are, and they're getting, they're getting jobs right away. They're opening, like at the West Side Bazaar, these little micro businesses with amazing food. And I think in 10 years, the city, just from a restaurant perspective, is going to be pretty amazing. So, like, I go to the West Side.
Just real quick. It's already there.
I know, it is.
Concerned, but okay, go ahead.
But I mean, you see all these, like, the West Side Bazaar has all these micro restaurants in, like, there's Thai, there's, Japanese crepes, there's, stuff from, all these other countries. And so, to me, who's traveled my whole life, and it's like I don't have to go anywhere except, like, down and around the block. So they're repopulating the neighborhoods, they're stabilizing the neighborhoods. They're adding this real flair. Like the other day I was driving down Grant, and there was a woman walking in very colorful clothing, and she had a bottle or bottles, like, a 10-pack or whatever of bottled water on her head, and she was carrying her groceries, and she just was walking down the street with a bottle, with a package of water. So it's adding this sort of exotic flair to our city. And I think we were always a city. It's like it's happening again. And they're getting jobs in local restaurants. They're very hardworking. They're thankful that they're here. And so that's also another kind of positive energy in the languages. I'm hearing a lot more French and, just all different sorts of languages. So I think that's amazing to have that sort of, investment of different cultures into Buffalo.
That's great.
Yeah.
What kind of, nothing's ever perfect, right?
Right.
What kind of resistance do you find to this rediscovering of Buffalo? What are some of the big things?
Well, I think there's a culture of people that purchase buildings in the city of Buffalo, and it was kind of like to sort of pull all the revenue out of it that they could, and they're not taking care of their buildings. There's not a pride. I think there's always fighting that. I think there's people that got discouraged and maybe live in their houses and sort of need to look around them and saying, oh, my neighborhood's coming back. You know, there's a little bit like the older generation. I think there's a little defeatist attitude. But now that, you know, it's coming back in, I think they're starting to realize, and I think the trouble is trying to get good, get homeowners again in these neighborhoods to really anchor them, and to get people that have properties that they're not taking care of or don't really want to sell them, because there are people that want, the city's cool again, people want to come in, and to get those in the right hands, because a bad, even on a commercial strip or even a neighborhood, that one bad house, you know, the poor stewardship of that building, it can really be detrimental to everything around it. So it's trying to get those people to let go. And sometimes they're quite stubborn, or they don't care, they don't get it. And their property values would go up if they took care. So I don't even understand it from a business perspective.
Well, I'm sure, you encounter that that a lot, but a lot less now, which is which I'm personally thankful for. Because in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a homeowner. I own a home in Black Rock, and my husband and I have owned that home for, it'll be 8 years now.
Okay.
I wonder what it is about that 7-8 year ago window that things started happening. You know, because for 20, 30 years, even more, people were saying about the projects at the waterfront and all these things. Well, they're now happening.
Right.
And we see it and we feel it. There are certainly neglected areas of the city that need to come on board, and people need to believe in those things as well.
Right.
But you can't change it all at once. How has the government of the city of Buffalo and the county of Erie, how have they helped and how have they hindered what you are doing?
Well, I think what was the watershed moment is when Bass Pro didn't happen. Okay. And I think everybody was like, you know what, that big silver bullet thing isn't going to save us. We have to save ourselves. So I think that was sort of a moment where we all realized, you know what, we know what we need to do. We can do it. So I think it happened at many levels. I think in the business community, I think at the government level, I think, and also individuals. I mean, it was inexpensive enough that you could actually purchase something and affect change. And so once that started happening and people started doing that, there was that kind of synergy. I think the city of Buffalo I think the leadership now is very pro, that, you know, they don't get in the way and they do help. I've never had a problem. And I think there's better leadership in those organizations that are, you know, like in the Larkin district, and, you know, the people there are on different committees for the state, and they're, you know, we have advocates for upstate New York now, and that's bringing money to this area. And it's also, I think there's, I don't know, it was like this wall came down, and all of a sudden the creative ideas and the execution actually go through with it. And Pagula with the Sabres, and him coming in with all, you know, and once there's certain individuals that start doing things, then other people kind of, you know, they're not afraid to invest. So it kind of, you know, goes from there. So, I mean, I think historically maybe different levels of government maybe they weren't anti, they didn't get out of their own way, and now they are. So I'm really thankful for that, because I feel like they're excited too. Like everyone's excited.
Yeah, you know? And as well they should be.
Yeah.
Now, at the risk of staying on some things that are kind of difficult, but I think it's important to recognize what is in the way and what things we need to overcome. The idea of reclaiming a neighborhood or an area, it's easier when the prices are down, right? Well, I read an article recently that Buffalo, the area of Buffalo, I think had the highest increase in property value or some
appreciation,
the highest percentage appreciation in the whole country last year or within the last few years. That's exciting.
Yes.
But the more expensive things get, the harder, I think, isn't it going to be harder to encourage people to invest when it's more expensive? I mean, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a product of success.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like when we first started on Amherst Street with, there being more traffic, and some of the neighborhood people were like, well, where are we going to park? And I said, well, you either have a viable business or you have an empty building that could potentially, and then we have to work on that. You know what I mean? And it was fear-based. It wasn't even accurately, the situation. So I think Buffalo is such a big city that if, like Elmwood Avenue and Hurdle, it's just pushing out. So the West Side, and then it's coming over our way, and now there's activists in Riverside. So I want it to keep happening because it'll just make people go into other areas and keep going, and we have a lot of space to reclaim. So I don't think that will be an issue, because if you get priced out of an area, then you have to sort of go into another area that might be on the cusp, but then you're sort of in the beginning of that. So, and nothing's far. Like, I find it funny, like, sometimes people say, well, I won't drive. And, like, it's not New York City where you have to plan 3 days ahead to get from point A to B. You can be, from North Buffalo to South Buffalo to, anywhere in the suburbs. And people in the suburbs can come downtown within 10, 15 minutes. So it's not like if you don't get in a certain area, you can't get to it and take advantage of all the fun stuff, So I think it's years off before, it's like in Manhattan where everyone's priced out. I mean, we have lots of room.
That would be a wonderful problem to have. Maybe.
Yes.
Maybe. I look forward to that problem.
Yeah.
So owning an art gallery, real curious about this. That's got to be fun to say at dinner parties anyway.
Well, I mean, I own the building, so I'm like, I'm like Marcus owns the gallery. Okay. But it's fun because people don't expect a woman, I'm not a girl, right? So that's fun because, like, even with the last building that I purchased, a guy stopped by. He was like cold calling some kind of salesperson, and he kind of brushed by me and he goes, well, where's the owner? And he just didn't even assume that I could possibly. So that's kind of fun, surprising people, because I want people to, I think, take away from is that you can do it. Like, you could do it. You could buy something. You could buy something. There's young entrepreneurs on Grand Street. There's a girl, Gabby Matina, who opened Gypsy Parlor. She's really young, and she's very courageous, and she's very positive. The Prish Moran, who is doing her. So there's actually, it's interesting because there's a lot of, there's the big time developers, the Rocco Terminis that do amazing things. Carl Palladino and all those, that
Benderson development,
Benderson, and but then there's all these sort of small entrepreneurs doing, and they're kind of like the glue, and they're in the neighborhoods. Maybe the other people are downtown in certain areas. And the great thing is there's everybody can get involved. And I think that's where the excitement comes from, because everybody can be part of that change. And people, it's very empowering. You don't feel that way when you go to New York, or you're just part of that. It's never an option. Like, you might have to, eat ramen noodles, or, not buy a new pair of boots or something because you have to put it towards something, but you can do it. It's not out of your realm. Like, you couldn't go to New York City and do it.
That's why.
So that's what's so amazing.
Yeah, for me, the idea of living in Buffalo affords me the opportunity to, in all honesty, do something like this. A cable access TV show where I get to talk to interesting people. I do comedy. I do a bunch of other things, and when I couldn't do that in New York, I wouldn't be able to survive. Working 3 jobs. Yeah. It seems like certain places you're more into. You're just working to pay the rent on your apartment, and you might have to have 2 or 3 jobs. It's tiring to get from point A to B. It's cities are hard, big when it's really big. That's why it's the perfect size. You can hide, right? If you want to hide and go off and do your thing, or you can be part of the scene. It's not too big or too small. It's perfect in that sense. So, I mean, not that I wouldn't like to see the population come back to what it was. Maybe, we can still use a lot of energy, but I don't envy living. I mean, I'm exhausted living in Buffalo. If I had more options of things to do, you know what I mean? Well, when you started out, I get it. But when you started out, you bought your first building. My guess is you didn't have a lot of experience to understand what you were going to deal with, right? That kind of thing. What are some of the bullet points, things that you might mention to me or somebody who might be watching this and says, you know what, I finally got good credit, because I'm pretty sure you got to have good credit, right?
Yeah.
I think that's
especially
a big,
nowadays.
yeah, especially now. Well, I mean, it's something that, you know, some people might want to do it, but boy, they don't have the ability. Well, there are other things that you can do, and we might get into those. But just say somebody says, hey, you know what, I do have credit, I do love this city, and I've always wanted to either make a difference or whatever the motivation is and stuff. What are 1, 2, 3 bullet points you would say, this is what I learned because I did it wrong, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think sometimes it's a blessing not to know everything. Like, if I knew now, maybe I wouldn't have done it, but being sort of naive is can be a blessing in disguise, because you take a risk that you normally wouldn't take.
Sure.
So, but me and I did commercial, but it's about, I investigated the business association. I saw that there were other people that cared about the area, that there, you know, that and they were very helpful to each other.
Okay.
I mean, it's almost like a second family to me, and it's easy, you know, like to get advice from even the big power players like Rocco Termini. I've asked him things like now, you know, I didn't know him back then. And people are willing to help. That's the great thing. People are willing to share their expertise with you. And just to really check out, word of mouth is great to get good crafts or to get good, people that are good carpenters and electricians and things like that. But at the beginning, you have to kind of plug into that. Like, you probably know all the great, you know, actors, and you know who's who and does what and who writes, because you're in that, you know, area of Buffalo. So, like, if you're thinking of doing it, like, you know, talk to people that have done it and find out, because people call me all the time for, like, you know, do you know a good plumber? Do you know? And I reference, and then I ask people, and we share. So I think to have a good network, a support system, if you want to go into a commercial area, and people will help you. It's really, I think, and just learning how to be a landlord, and in realizing that you're going to get calls, you know, at the wrong time, into you have to be patient, and you have to find the right tenants, and that sometimes is a process of you know, weeding out, and I didn't always have maybe the most ideal. I've been quite lucky though, but you do that at the beginning. You don't, because it's harder once someone is in to get them out. So I think it depends how brave you are. In some ways, but I didn't find I didn't have a horrible experience, because there were always people willing to give me advice or help me. So I figured it out. Could I have done it better? Absolutely. And now with each thing, I do get better. And I'm not like handy like some people are. I think I'm good at maybe orchestrating that, you know, from a management perspective. That's maybe, and finding something. Well, the thing is, if you find it cheap, you can rent it inexpensively. And so you can get like the creative people like Marcus Wise, who really, his gallery helped to, I think Mark Goldman, when he first came to look, was like, what's going on in the street? There's these galleries. There were 3 at the time, you know, and Glow, which is another one that he has, is on Allen. So it's being able to get it inexpensive to rent to maybe creative peoples in the arts, because they're always the people that gentrify, and I'm not using that in a bad way, but they go in where other people won't see, because they're creative and they're imaginative.
Yeah, and they don't have a lot of money.
They don't have a lot of money, but they have they're creative, and so they're trained that way. So where other people would dismiss it, right? They go in and and then everybody else wants to come after they've fixed it up. Sometimes at their detriment, because they get purged out, right?
Sure.
But yeah, always. That's why I love creative people, because you know, their minds work differently.
You mentioned, and I'm so glad I could talk to you for hours about Buffalo. I love it, and we're actually kind of running towards the end of the time. But I do want to get your take on this. 3 separate times during what you were just talking about, you mentioned, maybe even more, people were willing to help you. I happen to feel, living other places, I've lived a few other places, and I've done my share of traveling and whatnot, I happen to feel it's not just my hometown pride saying this,
Right.
but I think Buffalo, there's a tendency to err towards helping people. Do you agree with that? And if you do agree with that, why do you think that is?
I don't, it's interesting. I don't know if it's the immigrant, or a lot of us, maybe because we were a city but a lot of cities grew that way. And I assumed everybody was as friendly. Like, you don't realize until you go other places. I just thought people should be friendly. Like, I don't know. I didn't know any different, right? Western New York, growing up in North Tonawanda. So maybe because the city kind of went down and everybody was sort of in it together. And maybe even with our sports teams, there's a camaraderie that comes from the struggle, right? And now that things are kind of coming up, we're all excited to engage everyone around them to be part of it. I don't really know where it comes from, but you hear it constantly from people that have moved here. Like, oh my gosh, it's so friendly here. Maybe the immigrant base from back in the day, from people that were sort of from wherever they came from, were kind of displaced, so they needed each other to help each other. So maybe that sort of is ingrained in our DNA now.
I don't
know.
I think that a lot of it has to do with the weather and the fact that the weather forces us on more occasions than other areas to work together.
Yeah.
I think it's nothing for me to, in the wintertime, to have helped push one or two people out of a snowbank or up into their driveway or whatnot. It's just something that happens. And whether it's because I hope that if I do it, that maybe somebody will do it for me, and if it's that selfishness, that's fine if the end product is good. But I don't think it's that. I think it's the fact that we know what it's like to be stuck in a snowbank, and boy, we also know what it's like when some angel comes by and just points at your Vogue magazine and says, "Here, this opens up a world to you." I know that was on the plane, but to me, it's that we encounter that so regularly, it becomes subtly part of how we react with one another. I'm reminded of Atlanta, which just happened, the travesty down there. And part of me wants to laugh at it, but it was deadly, and I'm trying to make sense of why 2 inches of snow could shut down an entire metropolitan area. We've been shut down before, and things happen that way. But I don't, and I live down in Georgia. I didn't get the sense that those people are used to being required to help one another. Anyway, we can leave on that.
Okay.
I think you are absolutely fabulous. This is Sue Chelowa, and she's been our guest here on Buffalo Good. All the information about local groups that you can get a part of, we'll put on the bottom of the screen. But again, Sue, charming. You're great. It was nice to talk to you.
Well, it was great to talk to you too.
Fabulous. Peace.